action, here's our star. What a jump!
You cranked it until your knuckles bled. The red handle spinning in your fist, the spring winding tighter, the motorcycle rattling in the launcher like it was going to explode. When you let go, that little white figure on the chrome bike shot down the driveway so fast, your eyes could not follow it. Then it hit the ramp. For 1 second, Evel Knievel was airborne. And so were you. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you are watching from. The box was not big, it was not heavy, but the picture on the front told you everything. A motorcycle, a man in a white jumpsuit covered in stars and stripes, and a red launcher that looked like it meant business. Your father stood behind you and watched you open it with a look you did not understand at the time. He was not excited about the toy. He was excited about what was going to happen to you when you took it outside, because your father already knew. He knew that this was the toy that was going to teach you about wind and speed and concrete and pain, all at once, on the same afternoon. You did not wait. You could not wait. You were out the door before your mother could say a word. You were already kneeling on the driveway with the red Energizer in front of you, and the motorcycle clicked into place, and the little Evel Knievel figure sitting on top of it with his legs bent and his arms out and his helmet on like he was ready for anything you were about to throw at him. You grabbed the crank handle, you started turning, and on the third rotation your hand slipped off the handle and your knuckles hit the driveway, and you pulled your hand back and looked at the blood and the skin scraped off, and you felt something that no toy had ever made you feel before. You felt like a man, because Evel Knievel broke 37 bones and he never stopped. And you were not going to stop because of a little blood on your knuckles. You grabbed the handle again, you cranked harder, and you let go. The motorcycle shot out of the launcher like it had been fired from a gun. It hit the sidewalk and veered left and tipped over and slid into the grass, and the little Evel Knievel figure popped off and landed face down in the dirt. Your father walked over, picked it up, brushed it off, clicked it back on the bike and said, "Try again." 2 words that changed the whole afternoon. Try again. So you carried the launcher back to the top of the driveway. You set it down. You clicked the motorcycle in. And this time you cranked it slower, steadier. You could feel the spring getting tighter through the handle. You could feel the resistance building, and when you let go, the motorcycle stayed straight. It rolled down the driveway, it hit the sidewalk seam, and the front wheel caught, and the bike went up on one wheel. A wheelie, the holy grail. Evel Knievel was doing a wheelie on your driveway, and you screamed so loud the neighbor came out to see what happened. The neighbor's kid was outside within the hour. His name was probably Kevin. It was always Kevin. Kevin saw the stunt cycle, and whatever he had been doing went in the bushes, and for the rest of the afternoon, Kevin and you took turns cranking and launching and watching Evel fly down the driveway into the street where he was not supposed to go, but nobody stopped you because nobody could look away. By 3 o'clock, there were 4 kids on your driveway. By 4 o'clock, there were 6. Every kid on the block was standing in your driveway watching a 6-inch plastic man do things that none of them could do. You were the king of the street that day, not because you were the fastest or the strongest or the smartest, because you had the stunt cycle, and the stunt cycle made you Evel Knievel. Then the ramps started. That was the real game. The motorcycle by itself was thrilling for about 2 hours. Then somebody said, "What if we jump it over something?" and the engineering began. First, it was a book, a single hardcover encyclopedia laid flat on the driveway. Evel cleared it easily. Then it was 2 books, then 3. Then somebody brought a piece of plywood from the garage and leaned it against a stack of bricks, and suddenly you had a launch ramp and a landing zone and a distance to clear and a crowd of 7-year-olds standing on both sides of the driveway like they were at Caesar's palace watching the real thing. The crashes were spectacular. The motorcycle would hit the ramp at the wrong angle and spiral into the air, and Evel would separate from the bike at the apex, and they would land in different zip codes, and everybody would scream and run to pick up the pieces and reset and do it again. The crashes were better than the landings. The crashes were the whole point. You watched them on television. That was the thing that no other toy had. When you cranked the stunt cycle on your driveway, you were not playing with a character from a cartoon or a figure from a movie. You were recreating something you had seen a real man do on real television, on a real motorcycle, at real speed. Wide world of sports. Saturday afternoons, Jim McKay's voice. The camera pulling back to show the row of buses or cars or trucks lined up in a parking lot, the crowd behind the barriers, the engine sound building, and then Evel Knievel in his white leather jumpsuit rolling toward the ramp at 100 miles an hour and launching into the air, and the whole living room going silent. Your father leaning forward, your mother looking away, and you standing in front of the television with your fists clenched, waiting to see if he was going to make it. Sometimes he did. Sometimes he did not. And when he did not, when the bike hit the landing ramp wrong and Evel tumbled across the pavement like a rag doll in a hurricane, you felt something that children are not supposed to feel. You felt afraid for another person, genuinely afraid. And then the camera would show him getting up, waving, limping, broken, but standing. And every kid in America exhaled at the same time and ran outside to the driveway. Then came Snake River Canyon, September 8th, 1974. Evel was going to ride a rocket across a canyon in Idaho. A canyon, not buses, not trucks. A quarter-mile of empty air over a river with rocks at the bottom. ABC did not carry it. You had to watch it on closed-circuit television at a movie theater, and your father took you even though your mother said this is not something a child should see. You sat in that theater surrounded by strangers, and the screen showed the canyon and the rocket on the rail and Evel in the cockpit, and the countdown started. Then the rocket fired and rose into the sky, and for 2 seconds you believed a man could fly across a canyon in Idaho on a Tuesday afternoon. Then the parachute opened too early. The rocket drifted backward down toward the river into the canyon wall, and it was over. He did not make it. And you sat in your seat with your popcorn in your lap, and you felt something break inside you that had nothing to do with bones. You felt what it means to believe in someone and watch them fall. You were 10. Your father drove you home in silence. And the next morning you went out to the driveway and set up the Stunt Cycle and built the biggest ramp you had ever built, because if Evel was going to try again, then so were you. That was the connection that made the Stunt Cycle more than a toy. You were not pretending, you were practicing. Every launch on the driveway was a rehearsal for something you believed you might actually do someday. Jump a motorcycle over something. It did not matter that you were 9. It did not matter that the closest thing you had to a motorcycle was a Schwinn with a banana seat and a playing card in the spokes. In your head, the driveway was Caesar's palace. The stack of encyclopedias was 14 Greyhound buses, and you were not Kevin from next door or Tommy from across the street. You were Evel, and Evel did not stop when he bled, and Evel did not stop when he broke, and Evel did not stop when the whole world told him the jump was impossible. He just cranked harder. $125 million. That is how much Ideal Toy Company sold in Evel Knievel toys between 1972 and 1977. The Stunt Cycle was the beginning. Then came the scramble van with a ramp that folded out of the back, the dragster that you cranked sideways, the canyon sky cycle that was supposed to look like the rocket he rode over Snake River Canyon, the chopper with the high handlebars, the trail bike, the stunt stadium with the painted crowd on cardboard bleachers, and the figure itself, 6 inches tall, rubber body that you could bend into any position, vinyl head with a painted smirk that never changed no matter how many times you launched him into a brick wall. That figure was indestructible. You threw it off the roof, you ran over it with your bicycle, you left it outside in the rain for a week, and on Monday morning you bent him back into riding position and clicked him onto the bike and he was ready to go. Evel Knievel, the toy, was built the same way Evel Knievel, the man, was built, to take the hit and get back up. If you were lucky, you got the scramble van for your birthday, white with red and blue stripes, a ramp that folded down out of the back doors. You loaded the stunt cycle inside the van, drove the van across the kitchen floor making engine noises with your mouth, stopped at the edge of the linoleum, opened the doors, folded down the ramp, set up the Energizer, and launched Evel out of the back of his own van onto the driveway like a one-man invasion force. The van turned the stunt cycle into a story. It was not just a launch anymore, it was a mission. Evel arrived in the van, the crowd gathered, the ramp came down, the crank wound up, and the whole neighborhood held its breath. If you had the scramble van, you did not just own a toy, you owned a production. Your mother hated it. She stood at the kitchen window and watched you crank that handle on the driveway, and she saw the scraped knuckles and the skinned knees from diving after the motorcycle when it went into the street, and she said that toy is gonna send someone to the hospital. She was not entirely wrong. The stunt cycle sent more boys to the kitchen for Band-Aids than any toy in the history of the 1970s, but it also sent them back outside 5 minutes later because the ramp was still set up and Kevin was still waiting for his turn, and the world record for longest launch on Maple Street was 47 feet and you were at 43 and you were not coming inside until you broke it. Then Evel fell. Not the toy, the man. He beat a man with a baseball bat in a parking lot in 1977. It was on the news. Your father turned the television off and did not explain why. The endorsements dried up. The movie stopped. The toy company pulled the plug. The last item Ideal produced was the Strato Cycle, tied to a movie nobody remembers. And by 1978, the Stunt Cycle was gone from the shelves. Not gradually, not slowly. 1 year, it was the hottest toy in America. 3 years later, it did not exist. Ideal Toy Company itself was sold in 1982 and dissolved piece by piece through CBS and Tyco and eventually Mattel. The company that made the greatest outdoor toy of the 1970s disappeared the same way Evel disappeared from the television. Without a goodbye, the Stunt Cycle went into a closet or a garage or a box in the attic that your mother labeled toys in black marker and never opened again. The red Energizer, the chrome motorcycle, the little white figure with the bent arms. They sat in the dark for 20 years, 30 years. The ramps rotted, the encyclopedias went to Goodwill, the driveway got repaved. Kevin moved to another state, and the scars on your knuckles faded until you could only see them if you knew where to look. But you know where to look. You know exactly which knuckle. The right hand, second and third fingers. That is where the crank handle caught you on the third rotation when you were 9 years old and the spring was wound too tight and your hand slipped and the concrete took the skin off in a patch the size of a dime. You went inside, your mother put a Band-Aid on it, you went back outside, you did not cry because Evel would not have cried. And you were Evel, on that driveway, on that afternoon, in that neighborhood, in that version of America, where a kid could spend all day kneeling on concrete, launching a plastic motorcycle into the unknown, and nobody called it dangerous and nobody called it reckless and nobody said, maybe you should play inside. They just said, try again. Evel Knievel died. November 30th, 2007, he was 69 years old. He had broken every bone a man can break and survived every crash a man can survive. And he died in bed in Clearwater, Florida, with his lungs giving out and his body giving in to 50 years of impact. The man who could not be stopped was stopped. And on that day, in garages and attics and closets all across America, a little white figure with a painted smirk sat in a box and did not know. Somebody is making them again. A company in California found the original molds from 1973, and they are pressing new stunt cycles and selling them for $45 on the internet. Fathers are buying them for their sons. The reviews say things like, "I wanted him to see what real fun used to be like," and the sons are cranking the handle and launching the motorcycle across the living room floor, and their fathers are standing behind them with the same look on their face that your father had the day he handed you that box. That look says you do not know it yet, but you are about to learn something about yourself that no school, no screen, and no app will ever teach you. You are about to learn what happens when you try something hard and fail and bleed and try again. The driveway is still there. Maybe not your driveway. Maybe the house was sold. Maybe the family moved. But somewhere on that street, on that block, in that town, there is a driveway where a 9-year-old boy knelt on the concrete and cranked a red handle until his knuckles bled, and watched a 6-inch man on a chrome motorcycle fly through the air and land on 2 wheels and keep going. That driveway does not have a plaque, it does not have a marker, but you remember the exact spot. You remember the crack in the concrete where the ramp sat. You remember the angle of the sun. You remember the sound the spring made when it was wound tight enough. And you remember the moment you let go, and the motorcycle shot forward, and you were 9 years old and bleeding, and the whole block was watching, and it was the greatest afternoon of your entire life. Do you still have the scars? Show us. Tell us in the comments what you jumped it over. I read every single one.